Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is the Necromancer tank in regards to Greymoor. I've already updated the build even though Greymoor isn't out yet on PS4. It works fine now. I've changed a little bit in the attribute points and skills that we're using just to make sure it's gonna work just fine in Greymoor as well. We're no longer a vampire obviously, because you can be a vampire tank but then you have to be actually spec'd towards vampire tanking. And this is just for an overall build, so you don't need to be a vampire for this build. It works just fine without it. So let's get right into the character sheet. Let me quickly put up our spirit mender here. We've got 17k max magicka, 45k max health, and 20k max stamina, which are nice round stats overall. The reason I decided to opt for a bit of a higher magicka pool this time is because even though our magicka recovery is about 2,100, just now dropped off to 1,900 about. That's because of the spirit mender. As long as you keep him up, your magicka recovery will be higher than that. Is because most of our skills cost magicka, and most of our skills and heals are quite expensive in magicka. So I wanted to have a well-rounded setup with a big pool of 17k at least, and still 45k health, because a lot of our skills scale off our health as well, and then 20k max stamina to make sure you have enough for blocking attacks and everything, or dodge rolling occasionally, and still have a good amount of magicka recovery. And then our spell and physical resistances right now are 24 and 23k, which is not the highest, but if you manage to keep your bone armor up and your spirit mender, that's the two buffs that always need to be up. I'll get right into that with the skills. They'll go up to 29k, which is perfectly fine for every content. And your magicka recovery will stay at 2100. So really well-rounded stats here. And how do we get that is by putting 40 points into health, 15 into stamina, and 9 into magicka, just to make sure you've got enough of everything to survive. I usually always put all 64 points into health, but we can still reach 45k health without doing so, and I opted it's safer and makes the gameplay on this character a lot more smooth and fluent if you've got more of the other two values as well. We're using the Bewitched Sugar Skulls for food. They give max health, stamina, and magicka, and also give you health recovery. If you can't afford those, you can also just use the normal tri-stat food. Our Mundus Stone is the Atronach to increase our magicka recovery, because I can't stress this enough, like almost all the important skills in a Necromancer tank cost magicka. Even our taunt costs magicka, our main taunt. So you definitely want to always have your bone armor, spirit mender up, and your potions ready to stay on that magicka recovery of over 2k, over 2,000, yeah, 2k, and the big health pool. So much for the overall stats. Let's get right into the skills then. First up, from the one-handed shield skill line, we've got defensive stance. This is our main shield. I used to use bone surge here from the undaunted skill line, but both of them, if you look at it, give you a 14k damage shield over 6 seconds. You can quickly check that out in the undaunted skill line. Also 14k over 6 seconds. This one would return damage absorbed, or give you a higher synergy value, or a synergy at all if you're using bone surge. But the reason why I use defensive stance here is because it reflects the next harmful direct damage projectile cast at you. Plus, also, more importantly, while you have this equipped, the amount of damage you can block is increased by 10%, and the cost of blocking is reduced by 10%. So it just makes your gameplay a lot smoother. The shield is just as strong, plus your blocking costs less, and you can block more. So this is definitely the way to go for us. It looks like this. Turns you into a sort of irony, stony figure for 6 seconds, and then your shield is up. Next up is our main heal. This is actually a damage dealing skill, but it is our heal. The Hungry Scythe from the Bone Tyrant skill line, first thing you unlock. And what this does is, if you hit an enemy, it's dealing magic damage, but more importantly, it heals you for almost 7k health for the first enemy hit, and an additional 2k health for each other enemy hit. So if you're surrounded by ads, it stacks up to 5 times, and you can get a really big heal out of this. And after dealing damage, you heal for another 1k health every 1 second for 5 seconds. So this really is our major heal. It scales off of our max health, which is why I wanted to make sure we have at least 45k and don't drop below that. And it just looks like this. If you've lost health, just get 1 or 2 scythes in, and you'll see the heal is very big. Okay, next up we've got the Spirit Guardian. This is sort of our well, like a small version of Guard from the PvP skill lines. It lasts for 16 seconds. You summon this ghost to be by your side, and every 2 seconds it'll give you 2k health back to you or the lowest health ally around you. But since you're the tank and your allies are hopefully not right on you in most kind of situations, it'll hit you most of the time. And if it hits an ally, it's not bad either. Then you're supporting the group. While we have this active, 10% of the damage we take is transferred to the spirit instead. This is actually why we use this, because the heal isn't 100% reliable. As I said before, it can also go to an ally in your group that's got lower health. However, the 10% damage taken that is transferred to the spirit really helps us out. So it looks like this. You just summon this guy up. And also in your passives, you always want to keep this guy up, because that's where your magica recovery comes from. He'll give you, it'll say so in the passives, I'll get to that later actually, just let me quickly show you. Yeah, while you have your Spirit Mender active, your magica and stamina recovery is increased by 200. So you always want to keep this guy up every 12 or 16 seconds, however long it lasts. Yeah, 16. Just summon it again, make sure it doesn't drop off, always keep it up there. And 10% of the damage transferred to him is very nice as well. Next up from the one-hand and shield skill line is Heroic Slash. This deals physical damage and it afflicts the enemies with minor maim, reducing their damage done by 15% for 12 seconds, which is very nice for us. Just looks like this. You hit him with that slash, and then you can see above his head is the little icon that shows the minor maim, reducing all the damage he does now by 15%. So this is also very nice for damage mitigation for us. Plus, on the side note, we gain minor heroism, granting us 1 ultimate every 1.5 seconds for 12 seconds, which is very nice because Necromancer's tanks heavily spec'd into ultimate regeneration. You'll see that with our race and stats later. We really want to get as much ultimate regeneration as we can to pump out as many of our ultimates as we can. Especially if you're an off tank and you don't have any necromancers in the group, or also if you're just using Warhorn. Alright, so the next thing we've got is Inner Rage, and this is our main taunt, believe it or not. We're not using Pierce Armor on this. Inner Rage costs magicka, and it afflicts enemies with magicka damage, and most importantly, it taunts them to you for 15 seconds. So it looks like this. You just taunt the enemy, you can see the red flames on his head. That means he's only going to be attacking you for the next 15 seconds. You can also see the buff up there over his head, the broken little shield. Lasts for 15 seconds, and he's taunted and he'll only attack you. Next thing we've got as an ultimate is the Glacial Colossus. This comes from the Gravelord skill line. This is a huge Colossus dealing frost damage, and it can also stun enemies, but what we are actually using it for is the debuff of Major Vulnerability for 8 seconds, increasing the bosses or enemies damage taken by 30%, and this is huge. Necromancers are the only class who can apply that debuff to them, Major Vulnerability, and it cannot be hit again for 20 seconds, so if there's more than one Necromancers in your group, you might want to call out your Colossuses and then count 20 seconds down until the next one pulls his, because otherwise it won't work. But yeah, this is our main front bar alternate. Especially for off-tanking, it's really nice if you don't have a lot of Necromancers in your group to drop your Colossus. If you do, if you've got more than 3 or 4 Necromancers in your group that can keep up the Colossus uptime and Major Vulnerability uptime, then you might want to swap this to something else. A great option for it would be the Renewing Animation. This is the Res ultimate. This is a big AoE that can resurrect up to 3 targets in the location, and you also restore magic and stamina for each ally you attempt to resurrect. So depending on the content, if you know that you're in a trial with good healers, with a bunch of necromancers and all, you just want to swap out to whatever you need. Like, you can either play the Colossus here or the Res ulti, or if you're tanking some really, really heavy shit and you gotta make sure that you're not dying, you can also use the Ravenous Goliath, which is what the Bone Goliath transformation is gonna morph into. That's just gonna increase your health by 30k to an absolute, like, you're almost immortal if you've got this on. It lasts for 17 seconds too. However, I find most content in the game to be easy to tank without having something like this on there. So I usually opt for the Colossus or the Res Ultimate on the front bar. If need be, maybe the Shield Ultimate, Shield Discipline, just so I can block or resurrect people as well, but might as well resurrect them with Living Death. So those are my two preferred ultimates for the front bar. Let's get into the back bar. We've got Blockade of Frost here. This depends on the type of destruction staff you're playing on the back bar. If it's a lightning staff, it'll be the Blockade of Shock. If it's a frost staff, it'll be the Blockade of Frost. However, since we do not have a taunt skill on the back bar, I prefer an ice staff and the Necromancer. The lightning staff you'd usually use to set enemies concussed and off balance, whereas the frost one can chill enemies and make them immobilized. So, as you should know, heavy attacks with a frost staff taunt the enemy to attack you for 15 seconds and also grant you a damage shield. Since we do not have an active taunt skill on the back bar, this is why I prefer frost staff on Necromancer, because on the front bar we've got Inner Rage to taunt them to us for 15 seconds, and on the back bar we can just heavy attack with the ice staff and taunt them to us for 15 seconds. So this is our taunt, and yeah, you can see the shield going off. And then the actual skill, the Blockade, which is there to proc your Crusher Glyph, which I'll get into later when we're talking about the gear. Just taking frost damage, enemies can become chilled and immobilized, and you're also proccing your Glyph to reduce the target's spell resistance. Okay, next up on the back bar is Expunge and Modify. This actually, if you'd use the skill, it will cost health and remove negative effects from you. However, the reason I've got this on the bar is because while slotted, all of your abilities costs are reduced by 3%, and most of our back bar abilities cost quite a bit. The Blockade of Frost is about 3,600, here we've got 3,800, here we've got 3,600, so we're using some heavy magicka skills that cost a lot on the back bar, and Expunge and Modify is going to help lower the costs a little bit. Plus, if you see it in the passives, if you actually use that skill to remove effects from you, you can restore magicka as well. So this is a nice way to go here. Optional skills, if you wouldn't want to use this, could be Deaden Pain, which allows you to suck life from corpses around you, gaining ultimate, and also gaining major protection, reducing your damage done by 30%. And while slotted, having your damage taken reduced, so this could be a way to go if you don't want to use Expunge and Modify. However, I just prefer having that skill on there to have all my costs reduced a little bit and be able to restore magicka if I actually remove negative effects for myself. And as a tank, you'll be drawing the aggro of most of things, and you'll do get a lot of negative effects on you, so this can actually work very well with your resource management. Okay, the next thing we've got on the back bar is the Beckoning Armor. This gives you major resolve and increasing your physical resistance and spell resistance by 5k for 20 seconds. So another skill you could use for that is Balance from the major skill line, but this is our main source of getting major resolve. As you can see in the character sheet, my spell and physical resistance are around 22k right now, and as soon as I pop that skill, they will go up to 27k. And on the front bar, they will be even higher, 29k, because that's our main blocking bar. It all plays very well with the passives, it's nicely set together, and yeah, you always want to keep this up, just like your Spirit Mender, the Bone Armor, the two buffs. That's why I've got them both on the same button, sort of, because they're things that I want to keep up at all times. What this also does is it pulls enemies in, as you can see here. While active, enemies that strike you with ranged attacks will be pulled towards you once every 3 seconds. And that's how we can stack enemies very well, because we don't have the chains that the Dragon Knight has. We could use Silver Leash, but this works quite nice actually in the build that I've done here. Because as long as you've got your beckoning armor up, you can just range taunt things from far away. And then they'll make sure to attack you the next time they attack you with a ranged attack, and then they get pulled in by the beckoning armor. So you just need to make sure that you have it up at all times, and then range taunt things, and the next time they'll attack you, they'll just get pulled into the stack anyway. Okay, the next thing we've got is the Agony Totem. This is our main CC ability, sort of. Not only does it give you minor protection, which is why if we were to use an actual taunt like Pierce Armor, we wouldn't have to use Ransack, because we get our minor protection from this skill. I'll go into an optimal setup, an optional setup after I'm done with this though, because you can play this in a more traditional way if you wanted to. And this summons a totem, which after 2 seconds begins to fear all the enemies inside of the circle, and has them sort of stuck in place for 4 seconds. It also gives a synergy to people, and the totem is actually quite a big circle. It's very nice. Let's say this was your pile of ads there, and they were about to run away. Place this totem on them, and everybody inside of this circle after 2 seconds will get feared and not run away. Not sure if I can showcase that actually, if I attack a couple of them. 1, 2, yeah, no. Target skeletons don't get feared, but the actual enemies would, which means they would just stand still in fear in place for 4 seconds. So this is your sort of CC control ability that you can keep targets in place with. Next up then is Unnerving Boneyard. What this does is it deals frost damage, but more importantly it applies Major Breach and Fracture to all the enemies, reducing their spell and physical resistance by 5k. So this is also another reason why we don't have to use an actual taunt that does Major Breach and Fracture, because we can do Major Breach and Fracture in an AoE situation, meaning you'll put that Boneyard down on them, and everybody inside the circle is going to be afflicted with Major Breach and Major Fracture, which makes it a lot easier to kill ad pools, like a lot of ads, like in the beginning of Hellra stuff. You just throw that Boneyard down wherever you can to have everybody's resistances reduced, and it allows you to just go with the range taunt as only taunt other than the ice stuff heavy attack really. Okay, last but not least in the back bar, it's of course Aggressive Warhorn. This will increase your group's magic magicka and stamina by 10% for 30 seconds, and also it will give everybody major force, increasing their critical damage done by 15% for 10 seconds. That's the main reason why healers and tanks use Warhorn, to help everybody increase their critical damage. And yeah, it's been long one of the best ultimates you can run on a tank or healer, so definitely have that on the back bar. And then the front bar, either your Colossus or your Resurrection ultimate, or if you needed the Ravenous Goliath from the Bone Tyrant skill line. Now this is one way to set it up. Another thing you could do, if you're not into only having the range taunt on, if you're more of a traditional player and you need your stabby taunt, that's alright too. The build still works fine if you put Pierce Armor on the front bar, like you would on any other tanking build really, and then just not run the Boneyard, because you will get the Major Fracture and Breach from this. You'll just have to stab every single target instead of having it AoE, and then you don't have to run the Boneyard, and you can just put the range taunt on the back bar as you usually have it. However, for a range taunt you actually have the heavy attack from the ice stuff, so you could run a lightning stuff with that then, to give the group a bit of a higher uptime on concussion and off balance. That's also an option. That would be the more traditional setup, I take it. And then the other thing will be just have inner fire on the front bar and the boneyard on the back bar. Alright, so much for the skills. Now let's quickly have a look at the passives. They're really cool in Necromancer. I still love that class so much because they have great passives. When your Spirit Mender dies, the next cast of your Spirit Mender is reduced in cost by 50%. So this is very good for us because we do use that Spirit Mender, the Spirit Guardian morph. And whenever it dies and we cast it again, the cost will be reduced. Next up is our crit strike chance is increased. It's not really too important because we're not a damage dealer. However, we do get 10% here. So if you want to get it, get the passives. If not, you can leave them out. While a Gravelord ability is active, your spell and physical penetration are increased by 1,500. That's also more of a DPS thing. However, if you do have the skill points, just get it. It can't be bad. And then increases the damage done with damage over time effects by 15%. That's also nice because if you do run the Boneyard and the Blockade of Frost, you do have some AoEs. Not really an actual damage over time, other than maybe the magic damage from Inner Rage, but yeah, this is more like the DPS skill line, so you definitely want to have reusable parts. Everything else is sort of optional, but I'm always a fan of getting all of them anyway because they do a tiny little bit, and who knows, it helps. Next up, Bone Tyrant. This is the actual tanking skill line, so we definitely want to have all of this. Whenever an enemy you are in combat with dies within 20 meters of you, you restore 200 magicka. This is great, especially for ad pools. If lots of ads are dying, you just restore magicka, magicka, magicka. Definitely very, very good for sustain, so you do want to get that. Next up is Disdain Harm. Reduce the damage you take from damage over time abilities by 15% while you have a Bone Tyrant ability active. Now, we always want to have our Beckoning Armor active. You don't want to ever let that drop, just like your Spirit Mender Guardian. So definitely get that and make sure you always keep these two buffs up. Next up is increases your healing received by 2% for each Bone Tyrant ability slotted. We've got 2% on the back bar and 4% on the 2% on the front bar and 4% on the back bar. So this is definitely helpful. Healing received is always good, especially if you're a tank. And then Last Grasp is awesome. It just gives you a random 1,250 health for doing nothing, just for being a Necromancer. So that's also really cool. Definitely get all of those. And then in the healing skill line, where we do use the Spirit Guardian and the Expungent Modify on, while you have a negative effect on you, healing done is increased by 1%. That's very good for us as well, because as a tank we do get a lot of negative effects on us. While you have a Living Death ability slotted, your crit strike chance for healing abilities is increased. That's also very nice, since we do use the Spirit Mender. And then Corpse Consumption. When you use an ability on a corpse, you generate 10 ultimate. This is also very nice for us, because if you run the Boneyard, it can actually consume a corpse to make it stronger. Or if you run Dead in Pain instead of Expungent Modify, you also use abilities on corpses, so definitely get that in case you ever want to swap skills around. And then the last one I've already talked about, when our Spirit Mender is active, we get an extra 200 magic and stamina recovery, which is always nice. So all of these are very good as well. And then One Hand and Shield, you obviously want everything, and Destruction stuff, you obviously want everything. Also, you want all of the heavy armor ones, since we're using 5 pieces of heavy armor. And then in the medium armor, you only need Windwalker for stam recovery and reduces the cost of stam abilities, and Athletics for the movement speed. And then the light armor one, just the first 3, which gives you a little bit more spell resistance, because we are wearing 1 piece light, 1 piece medium, and a little bit more magical recovery. So much for the passives. Undaunted, you obviously want all of these. They're very important, especially since we're running 5-1-1, meaning 5 heavy, 1 light, 1 medium. We will get 6% increased max health, stamina, and magicka. And we will also restore 4% more if we are taking a synergy from an ally in a trial or a dungeon. So, for race, we are a Nord. You probably guessed it already because of the ultimate regeneration. This means the duration of any consumed drink is prolonged by 15 minutes. We get 1k more max health and a bunch of cold resistance, plus we're immune to the chill status effect, which is quite nice in some occasions. We get an extra 1500 max stamina, and this is very important. While we take damage, we gain 5 ultimate. This can occur every 10 seconds. So as a tank, you're always taking damage, so pretty much every 10 seconds you just get an extra 5 ultimate. And then our physical and spell resistance is increased by 4k, which is very nice, because with our bone armor up, we pretty much are on 29k. The cap would be 33k. So I would definitely be a Nord for this build, because otherwise it's going to be very hard to reach good resistance values unless you want to use a monster set like Tudons or something. But you don't have to do it if you're a Nord and you keep your bone armor up. Your resistances will be fine. Just remember never to let these two buffs drop, the Mender and the bone armor, because they're really where your resistances and your mag recovery comes from. They make you stronger as a tank. And then in alchemy we've got medicinal use, so our potions last 30% longer, and we actually have 100% uptime on the potions. Now I'll quickly get into other skills that are nice to have that I didn't talk about yet. We've talked about all of these. Restoring tether can be a nice thing, especially if you morph it, because then it actually can give you stamina back if you restore it from a corpse. Meaning you'll have to put this on a corpse and you'll get stamina back even while you're blocking. So in some situations this can be nice. I have never really, to be honest, found myself needing it, because we've got quite a nice stamina pool, and our skills don't cost a lot of stamina, and we can just throw a heavy attack in to restore stamina. But it can be nice in situations where you sort of have to perma block. If there's a corpse on the ground, and if it's the one from Spirit Mender, just siphon it and get some stamina back from that. Shield Discipline is also a nice ultimate. This just makes you block for about 8 seconds if you've got it fully leveled up, and during that time you will be blocking even if you resurrect or use other skills, so this can be very helpful in some situations. Crushing Shock is something nice to have in case you ever need to interrupt things, because there are a bunch of trials where bosses or so need to be interrupted or else they'll wipe the group. So it's always a good thing to have at hand, just in case you mightn't use it. And even if it's just for one boss fight, I definitely get it. Immovable can be nice. It also gives you major resolve, which you already have, but it makes you generally be a bit more stronger and allow you to block more, and grants you immunity to knockback and disabling effects. The only place I've ever seen people use that nowadays is in Veteran Sunspire, but even there you can sort of get around without having that on there. It just makes it a bit easier. So if you've got the skill points you can get it, if not, just never mind. Silver Leash though is a nice thing, because even though our beckoning armor drags in enemies that we've taunted that attack us, sometimes you want to stack things quicker, or it's important to actually stack things faster than your beckoning armor would, because it's sort of, well, you taunt them, you have it up, and then you gotta wait for them to attack you until they get pulled in. So if you want to make everything a little bit quicker, or it's important to just chain things in, just use the Silver Leash instead. In like 80% of the content I can get away without having the leash on, and the armor will be enough, but it's always good to have it leveled, just for in case you'd ever need it. Overflowing Altar is obviously a very nice option to put minor lifesteal on the ground, and have the DPS heal themselves by damaging targets, plus give them another synergy that heals them for 65% of their max health. So that's something you could use in situations where you're, for example, not having a healer, but you're running with a tank and 3 DPS. And then the Spike Bone Shield is a nice shield. I prefer the defensive one, but there's certain situations where it might come in handy, so get it anyway. And then the Necrotic Orb, obviously. I morphed that to the damage version, actually. The Mystic Orb. And the reason why is because I'm not going to do a lot of damage with it, but if I throw it into a group of DPS and they use the synergy, the damage they do will actually scale off of their max magicka and spell damage, so it'll be quite a bit of damage. So if you want to support the group with a bit more DPS, Mystic Orb is also a nice thing to go with. And then obviously Resolving Vigor, in case you'd try and run a set like, I forget what it's called, Powerful Assault, where using a skill from the Assault skill line will give everybody more spell weapon damage. It's a nice heal too, or if you don't trust the Scythe, because you might be in a situation where you can't actually hit anything because you might be range taunting a boss from way over here, and then you can't really hit things with the Scythe to heal yourself. So Resolving Vigor would be a nice stamina costing heal that gives you 8k health back over 4 seconds. And then obviously Purge and Barrier, which I have not unlocked here on this character yet. Purge just cleans yourself in the group. That's very good for trials like Halls of Fabrication, where a lot of negative effects are going on, even though we've already got Expunge and Modify. Purge will also heal group members next to you, so that can be very nice then as well if you need to cleanse the group from negative effects. And Barrier obviously is always good. This just grants you a huge damage ward. I think if it's fully leveled up, Reviving Barrier goes up to almost 30k damage that it absorbs for 30 seconds. Plus it also heals people for like almost all of their max health. So this is also a very, very good skill to have. I'm just gonna have to do a little bit more PvP to get it. Alright, so much for the passives. Now, let's get into the build. First set, you've already seen probably by the red balls flying around everywhere, is Eben. This adds max health, healing taken, and it increases your max health plus the max health of 11 group members, so your full raid group within 20 meters of you, by almost another 1k. This is always very good. Eben's been one of the great tanking sets forever, pretty much, just because it gives everybody 1k more health, which allows the DPS to spec 64 points into stamina or magicka, whatever they're doing. So this has always been a great set, and it works very well with this because most of our skills scale of our max health, and this gives us a lot of max health. It gives us 2 bonuses of 1k over 1k each, and then another bonus of 1k. Plus, it increases our healing taken, so this is definitely a great way to go for the Necromancer tank, especially since Necromancers, by design, are a bit more likely to be off tanks than main tanks, just because you've got really, really high ultimate regeneration. You can drop Warhorns, Colossuses, or even the Resurrection ulti whenever you need. And then you can even support the group by giving everybody another K health, whereas the main tank could be wearing Yolnakrins because he's more likely to taunt things at all times. So this is definitely the first one I would get and get in the right traits for the Necromancer. Okay, the second set we're wearing is Akvari Dragon Guard. This gives us magicka recovery, which we do need because Necromancer skills cost a lot of magicka. Another 4% healing taken and the 1k max health, and it reduces the cost of all our ultimate abilities by 15%. So there we go again. It plays very, very well into the Necromancer class with the ultimates. We can spam the Colossuses, Warhorns, Res ultis, whatever we need. And this gives us even more magicka recovery, which is nice to keep our skills up. And both of them sets just work really, really well together. So we've got a sword and a shield obviously on the front bar, and an ice staff on the back bar because of the taunt, like I explained before. And then Eben on the body. Jewelry will all be in healthy with magicka recovery. Enchants. And then for the monster set, you can really just go with what you need. I've got Stonekeepers on right now. However, this is because I've been main tanking a lot lately on the build. For main tanking on the build, Stonekeepers is probably the best option because it will make you gain charge stacks, sort of, and every time you get hit. And when you gain 6 stacks, you release the energy and restore up to 5k stamina and heal 5k. In Greymoor, though, this value will be halved, so it'll be about 2.5k. But it'll still probably be one of the better sets for sustain. However, the other set I actually prefer on this is Bloodspawn, which gives you stam recovery, and when you take damage you have a 6% chance to generate 14 ultimate. Again, the Nord passives make us gain ultimate, Akaviri Dragon Guard makes us gain ultimate, and Bloodspawn makes us gain ultimate. Plus it also increases our physical and spell resistance by 6k for 6 seconds, which can occur every 6 seconds. So a 6% chance sounds pretty low, but when you take damage, which you pretty much do every half second as a tank if you're in the face of a boss, it's actually proccing quite a lot. So it's always been one of the best tank sets in the game. And with the ultimate regeneration and the resistance gain for us, it just works very, very well with the Necromancer class. So this whole setup, Ebon, Bloodspawn, and Dragon, is just awesome for the Necro class, really, because it gives us everything we need. It gives us ultimate regeneration, magica regeneration, and health, and works very well together. So, trait-wise, you want the sword in either defending or decisive. I've got it in decisive here for even more ultimate regeneration, because the point of the whole build was actually to pump out as many Warhorns or Colossuses as possible while still being a viable tank. You can also use defending though if you want a little bit more resistances. So those two traits would be my top choice for the weapon. And you want a hardening enchant on it, because the only damage shield we've actually got is defensive stance. So gaining a tiny damage shield for 5 seconds is never a bad thing. It just helps a little bit. And then the shield you want in reinforced with a health glyph on it. And obviously the staff needs to be infused with a crusher enchant. That's the main reason why tanks even use staffs or bows on the back bar, to have that crusher enchant and reduce the target's physical and spell resistance by 2,000 for 5 seconds. And yeah, that value is higher when it's actually infused. Otherwise it'd only be 1,800 or so. Then you want the monster set in medium and light. It doesn't matter if you have a medium helmet or a medium shoulders, as long as the other piece is light. So one of them medium, one of them light. And you want the bigger one, the head, in reinforced, and the small one in sturdy. And just like that for all the other stuff, you want the chest in reinforced, the legs in reinforced, because that's the 3 big pieces on your build: the legs, chest, and head, all in reinforced, and everything else in sturdy, all the small pieces in sturdy, to help reduce the block cost. And then, as I said before, the jewelry in healthy for the max health with the magica recovery. Obviously, certain trials require certain other things, so in Cloud Rest you might want to run Swift instead of healthy, but for everything else on the Necro tank, really go with healthy, because a lot of our skills scale over our max health, and we do not want to lose that. I've already compromised a little bit by not putting 64 in here, but by splitting it to have decent overall pools that make the whole gameplay experience just easier for you. You don't want to go under the 45k health though, because a lot of our skills actually scale off of that, and it's just safer for you as a tank, especially if you're new as well. So yeah, so much for that. That's the sets. Optionally, I wouldn't really change that build, to be honest. Just ask the other tank to wear Yolnacrins. However, it's nice to have a set of Yolnacrins at hand, just in case you need to main tank, or the other tank only has Ebon and can't bring anything else to the table. At least you can switch to that, even though that's more for the main tanking, because as you can see, when you taunt an enemy, you give yourself and 11 group members Mind of Courage. As the off tank though, you might not be taunting as much as the main tank, so I'll stick with Ebon for this build for all occasions, except for if the other tank doesn't have anything else to wear but Ebon, then I'll swap over to Yolnacrins. As I said before, this is always my go-to set, Bloodspawn. Stonekeepers if I need more resistances, because I'm tanking something that's very heavy, like the boss in Veteran Hellra that hits a whole lot, and I need to make sure I get my heavy attacks in time, and I could use a bit of extra stamina recovery. Stonekeepers is a very nice option. And the other two things you could have at hand is Engine Guardian and Thorvacoons. Engine Guardian just randomly gives you back either health, stamina, or magicka. Sort of the smaller option for recovery. Stonekeepers is better, but Frostvault on Veteran is a very, very hard dungeon to beat, so if you can't do that yet, you can run Engine Guardian instead and just hope it'll give you the right thing that you need at the time. And then Turbo Coons is also a very nice option. This just puts Minor Maim and Defile on the enemy. I'd only use that though if that was actually necessary to reduce the damage done by 15% and their healing received by 15%. Other than that, with these two sets only, you're gonna be completely fine. Just always wear Bloodspawn unless you need extra resources, then wear Stonekeepers. And I wouldn't change Akaviri for anything really, to be honest. It'd be better, in terms of Alkosh, it'd be better for anyone else to run Alkosh, like let it be the main tank or let it be a stamina DPS. I would stick with Akaviri really, because that's the point of the whole build, is to get this ultimate cost reduction and pump out as many of our Colossuses or Warhorns as we can. Okay, champion points real quick. 72 Ironclad, 11 Spell Shield, 49 Hardy and Elemental Defender, 51 Thick Skinned, 27 Quick Recovery, 11 Heavy Armor Focus to even out our resistances, 40 Warlord to increase reduce the cost to break free, 19 Sprinter because Necros by default are a little bit slow, so I would definitely use these 19 points in here. They're really helpful. 16 Bashing Focus for a 10% bash cost reduction. We've got 64 in Arcanist for increased Magicka recovery, and then 56 into Tenacity to increase the amount of stamina we get back with a heavy attack. And then over here 66 in Shadow Ward and 9 in Tumbling for increased roll dodge. Reduced roll dodge cost. 75 in Blessed and 72 in Elfborn to increase our healing and crit healing. 66 in Thaumaturge and 56 in Precise Strikes. This is only there in case we are using Vigor as a heal, because that can crit, and then that will be a critical healing with stamina. So that would be 20% more. And then we are using the Boneyard and the Blockade, so the little bit of damage over time can be nice. Also, we can get the Last Stand passive. While we fall below 20% health, we gain Major Heroism, granting us another 3 ultimate every 1.5 seconds for 9 seconds. And you unlock that if you've got 120 points in here, which is why I threw these 2 in here to get that. And then we have 72 here and 75 here. And that 1 point is just because there's no other place to put it in really, so that's how it works. Alright, I'll hope to be able to put up a gameplay video of this build sometime soon. Necro tanking is actually loads of fun. I really enjoy it. It's a bit of a different style because you don't have the stabby stab tank, you do most of the things with range taunt. And you need to make sure that you've always got enough Magicka to cast all these expensive skills like the Agony Totem or the Blockade or the Boneyard. And always keep your 2 buffs up there, your Beckoning Armor and your Spirit Guardian. So, I hope you enjoy this. Try it out. It's a really, really fun and great to play build. And I hope I can back it up with some actual footage sometime soon. Alright, I'll see you later.